Hi, I'm Liana Wertman. I'm the founder and executive director of the Torah studio, and I just wanted to make a video about what Hevruta is. Hevruta comes from the Hebrew word hever, which means friend or buddy or pal. And in the specific case, Hevruta is the word for our learning partners, the people who are in our lives, maybe just for one class or one session, but maybe for a very long time, who we sit down to learn with, and often specifically to learn a text with. Sometimes it'll be like a quick 5 minute thing. You're just reading it out loud together to get a little acquainted to it. But if you're lucky, you might be getting to sit down with someone for 20 minutes to like 3 hours, which sounds crazy, but I always say that to my students. I'm like, 30 minutes of Chavruta sounds insane if this is your first time that I'm just like putting you in a breakout room with someone, but you're not going to believe that it was 30 minutes, and they never do. Unlike reading a book or a text on your own, you don't get to just stay in your head. You might understand the text differently from your partner. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually really helpful. By allowing yourself to learn with someone else, you allow someone else to teach you. And part of the fun of getting to hear multiple perspectives and kind of get out of our own bubbles is that we get to talk to someone else and learn about their brain. Not only do you get to schmooze with them, because of course you should, especially if this is your first time hanging out with someone, and honestly, all the more so if this is your 100th time hanging out with someone, check in, say hi, talk to your friend. And then you're just like giving yourselves an activity, right? You could have a craft night, but instead, you and your friend, this wonderful person, are going to look at a text together, and you are going to get to see how this person's brain works in situations that will never come up, especially if you're reading Torah, because all of those things, if they happened 5,000 years ago. So they're not actually about to have, like, I'm not actually about to watch the Red Sea split, but it's like really cool to get to talk to someone about, like, what does it feel like? What happens in your brain when the Red Sea splits and you're reading it out loud? And maybe that doesn't feel super relatable, but maybe that's because you haven't close read a text in a while. And suddenly, when you do the slowing down that I talked about, that kind of conversation really becomes like beautiful. And maybe when you don't agree with each other, you actually like each other more because, like I said before, those multiple perspectives are actually really beautiful. And the last thing I want to say about the goal of learning with another person, the goal of Chavruta, in my opinion, is that I really do think that there is so much value to learning on our own. But there is also a Jewish value and responsibility of sharing the Torah, the learning, the instructions, the Jewish teaching and excitement that comes up in our hearts and in our minds, and sharing them with other people. And it doesn't have to be that you write an article, you don't have to start a Substack just because you started studying Torah. You can just tell someone else about it. Let that Torah not only be teaching about who you are as a human and let that person get closer to you, but allow that person to get closer to themselves with you. This is all a practice. And if this is going to be your first time, it's going to feel hard and your muscles won't really be like worked in that way before. But I wanted to give some advice for your journey that is based off of something called the Hevruta Triangle. The Hevruta Triangle comes from a book called A Philosophy of Havruta by Elie Holzer and Orit Kent. Their triangle is the best tool to remember and make sure that you are actively engaging in a Havruta that is going to be meaningful for you. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen every single time, but like I said, it's a practice. And here is how that triangle works. So I'm going to assume and put my hand here so that in the future I edit this and add the Hevruta triangle. So as you can see, there are three parts to this triangle. Oh my God, innovative. I can't believe no one knew the triangles only had three corners before. But essentially these corners and the arrows between them that, as you can see, go back and forth, represent the three responsibilities that are being honored and thought about in a good Hevruta. And as you can see, I can't see it. I don't know why I looked there. So the first responsibility that you should be thinking about is your responsibility to your Hevruta partner. Your responsibility to your Hevruta partner, first and foremost, looks like trying to understand what they think. When you're listening to someone else try to understand the text, you are obviously trying to understand the text on your own, but you're also trying to not get your brains to think the same thing, but to actually pay attention to what the person who is with you is seeing in the text and to be curious about it. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to be trying to be convinced of it. But your curiosity is going to be the guiding aspect of this conversation, right? Allow the discomforts, the whoa, I did not read it that way. Tell me more. I wouldn't have thought that those two things came together. In fact, I kind of thought the opposite, but like, I need to understand how you got there. Whoa, okay, well, if that was true, what would that mean about blank? Really allowing yourself to stay curious in their mindset. And this really works because of the second responsibility, the responsibility that you and your Hevruta partner are having to the text. Now, I'm going to get a little philosophical here, but there's a concept by Parker Palmer called the third thing. When we're creating a circle of trust, it's actually kind of hard to say vulnerable things. Would you believe that? It's hard to say vulnerable things. It's hard to just like go out and say how you feel and how hurt you are and how hard it is to see violence happen in the world. And when we allow a third thing like the text into the room, we allow ourselves to not just be having a conversation about something that very personally affects me, but allows me to have a conversation about the bigger picture at all. A third thing requires seriousness, and Torah or Jewish text tends to have a kind of seriousness, at least just like a legitimacy of like, this is a text that we've studied for 3,000 years. So maybe it's worth studying. I got to admit, I agree with that, with my own statement. The responsibility that we have to the text as this third thing is to bring it into the room, to let it be a solid and functional third thing, to take it seriously. And what that looks like, right, is not asking it questions. I mean, you can go for it, but it's, I'm so sorry, not going to answer exactly on its own. It's just going to keep saying the same thing. But what it means is like, let it really talk then, right? Read the text out loud. Reading the text out loud does not mean you shouldn't read quietly. Maybe you're an internal processor. Read it quietly, but also read it out loud, because once the words are in the room, that you are giving the Torah its voice in that space, right? You have to read it out loud. And reading it out loud, not just once, but every time you're quoting it, go back to the place in text that you're quoting. Do not speak for the Torah. It's not your job. That's Torah's job. And often when we just speak for the Torah, when we decide what it means, we're actually adding in our own interpretation, which is great. That's what we're trying to do. But if we don't continuously check the text, make sure that we and our Hevruta agree that that's what the text says, even if we disagree on what it means, that really allows us to hold our own and the text to be its own solid thing. It's actually easier to disagree with the text when you just are like, I've done everything I can and that's what the text means and I don't like it, but it's there and I respect it and like I'm angry at it, right? Sometimes we can only actually be mad at the people we love the most, because the text being the third thing means that you are also building a relationship with it, not just the words of the text, but Torah, Jewish words, Jewish wisdom, and Jewish thought itself. And the last responsibility that makes a good Hevruta is the responsibilities that you keep for yourself. I don't get to tell you what those mean. Um, First, you are already receiving, as the you in this Hevruta, from your Hevruta, what I mentioned earlier, right? That someone is there to listen to you, to try to understand you, to be curious about the views that you have, to be excited, even if they don't agree. But that means you have to be in touch with yourself. You have to be there. And you have to be aware when you're not there. And that's okay. So I would say that your goal in Chavruta is to find the joy of that moment. And I use the word joy specifically because it's not about happiness or elation or like fun. Sometimes it's fun, like, but I find challenge in that way fun. Maybe joy looks like getting in that little bit of a tiff about something. Maybe joy looks like changing your mind, doing a whole 180. Maybe it looks like not even a little bit talking about Torah and just schmoozing with your friend the entire time because that is what you needed today. If you keep those three responsibilities, right? If you keep in mind your responsibility to your Chavruta, your responsibility to the text, and your responsibility to yourself, you're going to have a good Chavruta. If you've gotten to this point in the video, you clearly do want to do some Chavruta. And I want to say, if you're going to be doing this with Jewish texts, building a relationship to Torah, to Talmud, to Jewish text in general is a huge benefit to this kind of learning, because you get to do it over and over again. You practice the muscles of being in relationship with these particular texts. And suddenly their language feels less foreign. The language is easier to maneuver and respond to. It feels less like I'm yelling at someone who's not listening and more like I'm in conversation with something I know very well. And conversation, like I said, it does not mean agreement and it doesn't mean even alignment all the time, but it does mean respect and taking it seriously. And having another person in the room with you, rather than just reading, especially like difficult, upsetting, and I'm not even a little bit pretending that Torah and Talmud aren't full of some of the most upsetting things I've ever read, not more so than anything else, but just I read a lot of Torah and Talmud. So it's just the most likely place I'm going to come across that kind of content from 4,000 to 2,000 years ago. But like doing it with someone else means that you don't have to like just face Torah saying awful things sometimes. You get to be in conversation and it's a resilience that you deserve for the moments when Jewish community or Torah or Jewish wisdom fails you or hurts you. It's a little bit less of a failure when you have that resilient kind of relationship already rooted. Reflective practices and activities after you do your Chavruta is where the big learning is going to happen. Chavruta is very generative. Chavruta is learning, it's new information, it's new feelings, it's questions and curiosity and exploration. And you're going to take those feelings and that knowledge and that learning and that generation, and you're going to start putting it in the ground and seeing what starts to grow, right? Starting to like let those seeds that you collected start to root up. We have a concept of oral Torah. We have the concept that Torah is black fire, right? The ink of Torah, of the permanent word written on white fire, which is the empty page around it that we fill over and over again. What are you adding to it? That's what Hashem wants to know is like, what is happening when you plus Torah mix? And then what is happening when you plus Torah plus other people mix, plus other Jews mix? You get to actually not just like let yourself be changed by the text. You actually get to make some decisions around what you think and try saying stuff that's a bit bigger and harder. I would say that discussions that are like community led and open hearted and open minded discussions are absolutely a reflective practice that the community is doing together. We're saying, bring all of our feelings together. What happened in this text for us? And like, how does that affect each other? And how do we learn with each other and grow and self actualize together with this text? Um, that is what I wish all discussions were for. And if you come to the Torah studio, that is what discussions are for. Some of the other ways, right, that you can plant those seeds and try to understand what is growing for you is by doing some personal quiet practices. A lot of our classes have actually included that as a part of the course. And this is where I know that this happens from. And honestly, if you can also talk about it after that, even better. But writing practices, like just go for it, journaling, writing, getting stuff down, make something. Just like create something, make something that wasn't here, edit something, and like ask yourself how that was different from how you might have done it without that Torah. Look at it and say, like, what's the Torah? If I go back to that Torah now after having done this activity, what is the Torah that's living inside of me? I don't know what kind of art you do. And if this is something that feels exciting or scary to you, you can come to our Art Midrash class. We do exactly that. And of course, you can always meditate or take some deep breaths or just let it sink in and just let yourself enjoy the feeling of having learned. Maybe it wasn't about the larger picture for you. Maybe it was just about checking in and getting to know your friend or being in a conversation that was bigger than you. And you deserve to take some time to appreciate that you took that time for yourself because one of the most important responsibilities is you. And I hope that you believe that beyond just Chavruta. And I hope I get to learn with you one day in Chavruta.